The whispers traveled faster than a dust storm across the drought-stricken plains of Cottonwood Springs, Texas. "Baron," they called Victoria Harper behind cupped hands, their voices carrying through the general store and across the church pews each Sunday. The year was 1879, and in this frontier town, a woman's worth was measured by the children she could bear, and after 5 childless years of marriage, Victoria's husband had decided she had no worth at all. Victoria stood on the boardwalk outside the law office, the divorce papers clutched in her trembling hands. At 26, she was considered damaged goods returned to her father's home like merchandise found wanting. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly as tears threatened to spill onto her cheeks. She wouldn't give the onlookers the satisfaction of seeing her cry. "Miss Harper," a deep voice startled her from her thoughts. Victoria looked up to find Nathan Thornton, his tall frame blocking the harsh sunlight. His dark hair curled at the edges of his Stetson, and his blue eyes held a kindness she hadn't seen directed at her in months. "Mr. Thornton," she nodded, quickly folding the papers and tucking them into her reticule. "I didn't see you there. Heading home?" he asked, gesturing toward the dirt road that led to the Harper homestead. "Yes," she replied, her voice steadier than she felt. "Though I'm not certain where home is anymore." Nathan's gaze softened. He'd been running his ranch just outside of town for 3 years now, ever since he'd arrived from Colorado. The townsfolk respected him for his fair dealings and hard work, even if they considered him something of a loner. "May I walk with you?" he asked, offering his arm. Victoria hesitated. Being seen with a man so soon after her divorce would only fuel the gossip mill. But something in Nathan's expression respect perhaps made her place her gloved hand on his forearm. They walked in silence past the dry goods store, where Mrs. Abernathy and her daughter paused their sweeping to stare openly. Victoria kept her chin raised, though her stomach churned with humiliation. "Pay them no mind," Nathan said quietly. "Small towns have small minds sometimes." "And long memories," Victoria added bitterly. "I'll forever be known as Edward Sullivan's barren ex-wife." Nathan stopped walking, turning to face her. "Is that what he told everyone?" Victoria looked away. "He didn't need to. 5 years without a child speaks for itself in a place like this." "Did you ever consider it might have been him?" Nathan asked, his voice low enough that only she could hear. Victoria's eyes widened. The thought had occurred to her, of course, but such things weren't discussed in polite society, especially not between an unmarried man and woman on Main Street. "It doesn't matter now," she said finally. "The result is the same." They continued walking until they reached the edge of town, where the packed dirt road gave way to the winding path toward her father's modest ranch. In the distance, the setting sun painted the hills in hues of orange and purple. "Miss Harper," Nathan said, removing his hat and holding it against his chest. "I know this might seem forward, but I've been meaning to speak with you for some time." Victoria braced herself. Since word of her impending divorce had spread, she'd received pitying looks from the women and leering glances from certain men who assumed her desperation might make her an easy target. "I need a wife," Nathan said plainly. Victoria's mouth fell open slightly before she composed herself. "Mr. Thornton, I appreciate your candor, but I've just ended one marriage today. I'm hardly in a position to, please hear me out," he interrupted gently. "I've got a good spread, almost 800 acres. The house is solid, though it needs a woman's touch. I can offer you protection, respect, and a fresh start away from all this gossip." "But why me?" Victoria asked, genuinely perplexed. "You could have your pick of unmarried girls in the county, ones who could give you children." Nathan's expression remained steady. "I'm 31 years old, Miss Harper. I've no interest in girls. I want a woman who understands hard work and hardship. As for children," he shrugged, "if they come, they come. If not, we'd still have a life worth living." Victoria studied his face, searching for any sign of deception or pity. Finding none, she still shook her head. "You hardly know me, Mr. Thornton." "I know enough," he replied. "I've watched how you handle yourself with dignity despite what this town throws at you. I've seen your kindness to the Wilkins children when their mother was sick. And I've noticed how you're the only person who remembers to bring flowers to the unmarked graves in the cemetery." Victoria was startled that he had observed so much. "Those are small things." Those are the things that matter, Nathan countered. I'm not offering romance, Miss Harper, just practicality. You need a home where you're respected. I need a partner to help run mine. We could help each other. The proposition hung in the air between them as a warm breeze rustled the tall grass alongside the road. In the distance, a coyote called out to the approaching night. May I think about it? Victoria asked finally. Nathan nodded, placing his hat back on his head. Take all the time you need, my offer stands. He tipped his hat respectfully. Good evening, Miss Harper. Victoria watched him walk back toward town, his tall figure silhouetted against the darkening sky. A marriage of convenience wasn't what she had dreamed of as a young girl, but dreams seemed like luxuries now. And Nathan Thornton had offered her something no one else had in a long time, a choice. The next morning, Victoria sat at her father's kitchen table, absently stirring her coffee as he read the newspaper across from her. Abraham Harper was a quiet man who had grown quieter since his wife's death 10 years ago. He hadn't said a word about Victoria's divorce, merely nodded when she returned home with her belongings, as though he'd been expecting it. You've got a visitor, he said suddenly, looking out the window. Thornton's boy. Victoria's heart quickened as she rose to smooth her simple calico dress. He mentioned he might call. Her father folded his newspaper deliberately. What's his business? Victoria hesitated. He's made me an offer of marriage. Abraham's bushy eyebrows shot up. Already, ink's barely dry on your divorce papers. It's not like that, Victoria explained. It would be a practical arrangement. He needs help with his ranch and I. She trailed off, unsure how to explain her desperate need to escape the pitying glances and whispered comments. And you need to get away from this town and its wagging tongues, her father finished for her. His weathered face softened slightly. You planning to accept him? Victoria glanced out the window where Nathan sat atop his chestnut gelding, patient and straight-backed. I believe I am, her father nodded slowly. Thornton's a good man, pays his debts, treats his animals well. High praise from Abraham Harper. If he's offering you respect, that's more than Sullivan ever did. A knock sounded at the door. Victoria took a deep breath and went to answer it. Nathan stood on the porch, hat in hand, freshly shaved. Good morning, Miss Harper. I hope I'm not calling too early. Not at all, she replied, stepping aside to let him in. My father and I were just having coffee. Would you like some? Thank you, he said, nodding respectfully to Abraham as he entered. They sat in awkward silence as Victoria poured a cup for Nathan. He took a sip, seeming to gather his thoughts. Mr. Harper, he finally said, addressing her father, I've asked your daughter to consider becoming my wife. I want you to know my intentions are honorable. I can provide well for her. Abraham studied the younger man over his coffee cup. Victoria tells me it's a practical arrangement. Nathan nodded. Yes, sir, but I promise to treat her with every respect and consideration. And if she can't give you children? Abraham asked bluntly, causing Victoria to flinch. Nathan's gaze never wavered. Then we'll have each other, which is more than many can claim. Abraham considered this, then looked at Victoria. This what you want, daughter? Victoria met her father's eyes. Yes, she said, surprised by the certainty in her voice. It is. Abraham pushed back from the table. Then I'll leave you two to discuss details. He paused at the doorway. Thornton, I expect you to keep your word. Victoria's had enough disappointment. Yes, sir, Nathan replied solemnly. When they were alone, Victoria turned to Nathan. I accept your proposal, Mr. Thornton. Relief crossed his features. Thank you, and please call me Nathan. Nathan, she repeated softly. When would you like to proceed? The circuit preacher comes through next week, he said. Would that give you enough time to prepare? Victoria thought of the few belongings she would need to pack, the simple dresses that would serve her well on a working ranch. Yes, that should be sufficient. Nathan reached into his pocket and pulled out a small object wrapped in cloth. I have something for you. He placed it on the table and carefully unwrapped it, revealing a simple gold band. It was my mother's. I'd be honored if you'd wear it. Victoria stared at the ring, unexpected emotion rising in her throat. It's beautiful, she whispered, extending her hand. Nathan slid the ring onto her finger. It was slightly loose, but the weight of it felt strangely comforting. His hand lingered on hers for a moment, warm and calloused. We'll make this work, Victoria, he said quietly. I give you my word. For the first time in months, Victoria felt a flicker of hope. Not romance, perhaps, but something equally precious, the possibility of peace. The wedding was a simple affair, held in the small white church at the edge of town. Victoria wore her best dress, a dove-gray silk that had been her mother's, while Nathan looked uncomfortable but dignified in a black suit. The townspeople came, some out of respect for Nathan, others out of curiosity or a desire to gossip. Victoria held her head high as she walked down the aisle on her father's arm, ignoring the whispers that followed her like shadows. Didn't waste any time, did she? Poor Thornton doesn't know what he's getting into. But this one won't last 5 years either. The preacher, a kind-eyed man named Reverend Miller, spoke the traditional words with sincerity. When Nathan took Victoria's hands in his and promised to cherish her in sickness and in health, his voice was steady and sure. Victoria made her own vows with quiet dignity, hoping that with time she might fulfill them not just out of duty but with genuine feeling. I now pronounce you man and wife, Reverend Miller declared. Mr. Thornton, you may kiss your bride. Victoria tensed slightly. They hadn't discussed this part. Nathan seemed to sense her uncertainty. He leaned forward and placed a gentle kiss on her cheek, his lips barely brushing her skin. The gesture was respectful, almost tender, and Victoria felt a rush of gratitude toward this man who was now her husband. The small reception was held at the town hall, with simple refreshments provided by the church ladies. Victoria accepted congratulations with a polite smile, though she noticed many of the women's expressions didn't reach their eyes. "Congratulations, Mrs. Thornton." Edward Sullivan's voice came from behind her, and Victoria turned to face her ex-husband. He was a handsome man with cold eyes, holding a glass of punch and wearing an expression of smug amusement. Didn't take you long to find a replacement. Before Victoria could respond, Nathan appeared at her side, his hand coming to rest protectively at the small of her back. "Sullivan," he said with a curt nod. Edward's smile tightened. "Thornton, I hope you know what you're getting. 5 years and not even a hint of a child." Nathan's expression remained impassive. "I got exactly what I wanted, a woman of character and intelligence. Now, if you'll excuse us, I'd like to dance with my wife." He led Victoria to the small area where other couples were dancing to the music of a fiddle and harmonica. As Nathan's arm encircled her waist, Victoria looked up at him with newfound appreciation. "Thank you," she said softly. "For what? For defending me. You didn't have to do that." Nathan's blue eyes met hers. "You're my wife now. That means something to me." They swayed together to the music, not speaking but finding a comfortable rhythm. Victoria was acutely aware of Nathan's height, the broad expanse of his shoulders, the clean scent of soap that clung to him. This man was now her husband, and tonight they would share a home and a bed. The thought sent a flutter of anxiety through her. Her first marriage had taught her that a woman's pleasure was secondary, if considered at all. Edward had approached their marital duties with efficiency and little warmth, growing increasingly resentful as months passed without conception. As if sensing her thoughts, Nathan leaned down to speak quietly in her ear. "Victoria, I want you to know something. Our arrangement. I won't demand anything you're not ready to give." Victoria felt her cheeks flush. "I understand my duties as a wife." "They're not duties between us," Nathan said firmly. "They're choices. I meant what I said about respect being the foundation of our marriage." Before Victoria could respond, the music ended, and they were surrounded once again by well-wishers. The rest of the reception passed in a blur, and soon it was time to depart for Nathan's ranch, her new home. They traveled in Nathan's wagon, Victoria's trunk secured in the back alongside wedding gifts from the townspeople. As they left Cottonwood Springs behind, Victoria felt a curious mixture of trepidation and relief. The familiar buildings receded into the distance, taking with them the weight of judgment and failure she'd carried for so long. "It's about an hour's ride," Nathan told her, handling the reins with practiced ease. "The land opens up once we get past Miller's Creek." Victoria nodded, watching the landscape change as they traveled. Spring had painted the rolling hills in vibrant greens, with wildflowers dotting the tall grass in splashes of yellow and purple. In the distance, A herd of cattle grazed peacefully beneath the vast Texas sky. "Tell me about your ranch," Victoria said, genuinely curious about the place that would now be her home. Nathan's face brightened, and she realized it was the first time she'd seen him truly smile. "It's good land. The previous owner let it go to seed, but I've been working it back to life these past 3 years. We've got a steady creek that hasn't dried up even in the worst droughts, pastureland for the cattle, and some of the finest horses in the county." "You breed horses?" Victoria asked, intrigued. "Starting to," Nathan nodded. "Got 3 mares and a stallion with bloodlines that trace back to Kentucky. The foals should fetch a good price, enough to expand the herd eventually." Victoria listened as Nathan spoke passionately about his plans for the ranch, his hopes for breeding stock, and the improvements he'd made to the land. She found herself drawn in by his enthusiasm, asking questions and offering observations that seemed to please him. "You know something about ranching," he remarked, looking impressed. "I grew up helping my father," Victoria explained. "After my mother passed, he taught me everything he would have taught a son. I can mend fences, help with calving, and even break a horse if needed, though I'm not as strong as a man would be." Nathan gave her an appraising look. "Strength isn't everything. Sometimes patience and intelligence work better. I'm glad to have a partner who understands the work." The word partner settled warmly in Victoria's chest. Edward had never seen her as an equal, dismissing her knowledge and confining her to household duties. As they crested a hill, Nathan slowed the wagon. "There it is," he said, a note of pride in his voice. "Thornton Ranch." Victoria leaned forward, taking in the sight below. A 2-story white farmhouse stood in a grove of oak trees, smoke curling lazily from its chimney. A large barn painted red flanked one side, with corrals and outbuildings arranged neatly around it. Fields stretched out behind the house and cattle dotted the pastureland beyond. It wasn't the largest ranch Victoria had seen, but it was well tended and promising. "It's lovely," she said sincerely. "It needs work," Nathan admitted, "but it's home." He glanced at her. "Our home now." As they approached, a figure emerged from the barn, a gray-haired man who waved at their arrival. "That's Chester Jenkins," Nathan explained. "He helps with the ranch, lives in the cabin out back, been with me since I bought the place. There's also Maria Diaz, who comes 3 times a week to help with cleaning and laundry." Victoria nodded, appreciating that Nathan had thought to tell her about the people she would encounter in her new home. They pulled up to the house, and Nathan jumped down from the wagon, coming around to offer Victoria his hand. She took it, feeling the strength in his grip as he helped her down. "Welcome home, Mrs. Thornton," he said softly. Victoria stood for a moment, looking up at the house that was now hers to care for. The front porch wrapped around one side, with a swing hanging at one end. Curtains fluttered in open windows, and pots of geraniums added bright splashes of color. "Someone's been preparing for my arrival," Victoria observed, noting the freshly swept porch and polished windows. Nathan looked slightly embarrassed. "Maria's been working extra hard, and I might have planted those flowers myself. Thought the place should look nice for you." The simple gesture touched Victoria deeply. "Thank you," she said, her voice catching slightly. Chester approached, removing his hat respectfully. "Welcome, Mrs. Thornton. It's a pleasure to have you here." "Thank you, Mr. Jenkins," Victoria replied warmly. "I look forward to getting to know you." "Chester, could you see to the horses?" Nathan asked. "I'd like to show Victoria around." "Of course, boss." Chester nodded, taking the reins and leading the wagon toward the barn. Nathan offered Victoria his arm. "Shall we?" The house was larger than it appeared from outside, with a spacious kitchen and dining room on the ground floor, along with a comfortable sitting room and Nathan's small office. Upstairs were 3 bedrooms and a bathroom with an actual bathtub, a luxury Victoria hadn't expected. "This is our room," Nathan said, opening the door to the master bedroom. Victoria stepped inside, taking in the large 4-poster bed covered with a patchwork quilt, the dresser with a mirror above it, and the rocking chair by the window that overlooked the pastures. The room was simply furnished but comfortable, with fresh wildflowers in a vase on the bedside table. "It's very nice," she said, trying to hide her nervousness at the sight of the bed they would share. Nathan seemed to understand. I'll bring your trunk up and then give you some time to settle in. Maria left a cold supper in the kitchen for us whenever you're ready. Victoria nodded gratefully. Thank you. When Nathan left to fetch her trunk, Victoria moved to the window, gazing out at the land that stretched before her. The setting sun cast long shadows across the pastures, and in the distance, she could see cattle making their way toward the creek. It was peaceful here, far from the judgmental eyes of Cottonwood Springs. She turned as Nathan returned with her trunk, setting it carefully at the foot of the bed. I cleared some space in the dresser and wardrobe for your things, he said. And that empty bookshelf is yours as well, for anything you'd like to display. You've thought of everything, Victoria remarked, surprised by his consideration. Nathan shrugged. I want you to feel at home here. He moved toward the door. I'll let you get settled. Take all the time you need. Alone in the room, Victoria opened her trunk and began to unpack her belongings, the dresses and undergarments, the few books she cherished, the small wooden box containing her mother's cameo and letters. As she placed each item in its new home, she felt herself beginning to relax. This was a new beginning, a chance to build something different from the painful failure of her first marriage. Later, as they sat across from each other at the kitchen table sharing a simple meal of cold chicken, bread, and apple preserves, Victoria studied her new husband in the warm glow of the oil lamps. Nathan ate with the hearty appetite of a man who worked hard, but his manners were unexpectedly refined. Where are you from originally? She asked, realizing how little she knew about him. Nathan took a sip of water before answering. Colorado originally. My father had a smaller ranch there near Colorado Springs. After he and my mother passed, I sold it and came to Texas, wanted a fresh start. I'm sorry about your parents, Victoria said softly. It was years ago, Nathan replied, though a shadow crossed his face. Influenza took them both within a week of each other. I was 25, already helping run the ranch, so I managed. No siblings. Nathan shook his head. Just me. What about you? I know your mother passed, but do you have brothers or sisters? A brother, Victoria said. James. He went east for school and stayed there. He's a lawyer in Boston now, married with 2 children. She hesitated before adding, we don't correspond much anymore. He didn't approve of Edward, and then when the marriage failed. He blamed you, Nathan asked, his brow furrowing. Not exactly, Victoria clarified, but he didn't understand why I couldn't just make it work. From a distance, things always seem simpler than they are. Nathan nodded thoughtfully. That's true of most things in life. He pushed his plate away, regarding her with a direct gaze. Victoria, I want to be clear about something. This marriage, I know it started as a practical arrangement, but I hope in time it might become more. Not just for convenience, but for companionship, perhaps even friendship. Victoria was touched by his honesty. I would like that too, she admitted. Friendship would be welcome. Something flickered in Nathan's eyes, relief perhaps, or hope. Good, he said simply. That's good. Later that night, after Victoria had bathed and changed into her nightgown, she sat at the edge of the bed, brushing her long auburn hair with nervous strokes. The bedroom door opened and Nathan entered, carrying an extra pillow and blanket. I thought I'd sleep in the spare room tonight, he said, his voice gentle. Give you some time to adjust. Victoria looked up, surprised. But we have time, Victoria, Nathan interrupted softly. All the time we need. There's no rush. Relief and something like disappointment mingled in Victoria's chest. Thank you, she said, setting down her hairbrush. You're very considerate. Nathan crossed the room and after a moment's hesitation bent to place a chaste kiss on her forehead. Sleep well, Victoria. Tomorrow I'll show you the rest of the ranch. As he turned to leave, Victoria called out, Nathan. He paused in the doorway, looking back. I'm glad I accepted your proposal, she said honestly. A smile warmed his features. So am I. When he was gone, Victoria climbed beneath the quilt and blew out the lamp. In the darkness, she listened to the unfamiliar sounds of her new home, the distant lowing of cattle, the occasional whinny of a horse, the creaking of the house as it settled. For the first time in years, she fell asleep without the weight of judgment pressing down on her, and her dreams were peaceful. The days that followed settled into a rhythm as Victoria learned the workings of Thornton Ranch. Each morning, she rose early to prepare breakfast for Nathan and Chester before they headed out to tend to the cattle, or mend fences. She spent her days exploring the house and grounds, taking inventory of supplies, and planning improvements to the kitchen garden that had been somewhat neglected. On the days Maria came to help with the cleaning, Victoria worked alongside her, learning about the local plants and remedies from the older woman, whose family had lived in the area for generations. "You have good hands for growing things," Maria observed one morning as they worked in the garden, Victoria carefully transplanting seedlings. "Soon this garden will be the envy of the county." Victoria smiled, pleased by the compliment. "My mother taught me." She always said a good garden was worth more than gold on the frontier. "A wise woman," Maria nodded. "And how are you settling in with Senor Nathan? He is a good man, yes." "Yes," Victoria replied honestly. "He's been very kind and patient." Maria's dark eyes were knowing. "Patience is good, but don't let him be too patient, eh? A marriage needs more than kindness to flourish." Victoria felt her cheeks warm at the woman's meaning. Though she and Nathan had been married for nearly 2 weeks, they still slept in separate rooms. Each night, he kissed her forehead and bid her good night with perfect gentlemanly restraint. While Victoria appreciated his consideration, she was beginning to wonder if his reluctance stemmed from something deeper, perhaps the same doubts about her that had plagued Edward. That evening, Victoria took special care with dinner, preparing Nathan's favorite beef stew with dumplings and an apple pie for dessert. She wore one of her nicer dresses and pinned her hair up in a style that flattered her heart-shaped face. When Nathan came in from the fields, he paused in the doorway, his gaze traveling over her appreciatively. "You look lovely," he said, removing his hat. "What's the occasion?" "No occasion," Victoria replied, feeling suddenly shy. "I just wanted to do something nice." Nathan washed up at the pump outside before joining her at the table. His hair was damp, and he'd changed into a clean shirt that brought out the blue of his eyes. Victoria found herself studying the strong lines of his jaw, the breadth of his shoulders, the way his hands, strong and calloused from work, handled his utensils with surprising grace. "This is delicious," he said after a few bites. "You're spoiling me, Victoria. I've been living on my own cooking and Maria's occasional meals for too long." "I enjoy cooking," she told him, "and I'm glad to have someone to cook for." They ate in companionable silence for a while, the only sounds the clink of silverware and the distant calls of whippoorwills as dusk settled over the ranch. "I saw the work you've been doing in the garden," Nathan said eventually. "It's looking good." "Those tomato plants you put in should do well there." Victoria nodded, pleased that he'd noticed. "I'm hoping to grow enough to preserve for winter, and I thought we might expand it next year, add some berry bushes along the south side." "Next year," Nathan repeated, a small smile playing at his lips. "I like hearing you make plans for the future here." "I am happy here," Victoria admitted, surprising herself with the truth of it. "Happier than I've been in a long time." Nathan's expression softened. "I'm glad." He hesitated, then reached across the table to cover her hand with his. "Victoria, there's something I've been wanting to tell you." She tensed slightly, years of disappointment making her wary of serious conversations. "Yes. I knew who you were before I ever approached you that day in town," Nathan confessed. "I'd noticed you for months, the quiet dignity you showed despite how some folks treated you, the kindness you extended to others even when they gave you none in return." Victoria stared at him, processing this revelation. "You were watching me." "Not in an improper way," Nathan hastened to clarify. "I just admired you from afar. When I heard about your divorce, I saw an opportunity to offer you a way out of a difficult situation. But it wasn't just charity on my part." His thumb stroked the back of her hand gently. "I wanted you here, Victoria, not just any wife, you specifically." Victoria's heart quickened at his words and the tenderness in his eyes. "Why didn't you tell me this before?" "I didn't want you to feel pressured," he explained, "or to think I had expectations beyond our arrangement. I wanted to give you time to get to know me, to feel comfortable here." "I do feel comfortable," Victoria said softly. "More than comfortable." Nathan's gaze intensified. "What are you saying, Victoria?" She took a deep breath, gathering her courage. "I'm saying that perhaps we've been too cautious with each other, too concerned about crossing boundaries." She turned her hand beneath his, lacing their fingers together. "I'm your wife, Nathan." In name, yes, but I'd like to be your wife in truth as well. Nathan's breath caught audibly. Are you certain? There's no rush, Victoria. I meant what I said about giving you time. I'm certain, she said, meeting his gaze steadily. Unless. Unless you don't want, I want, he interrupted, his voice dropping to a husky whisper. God knows I want, but I need you to be sure. This isn't about obligation or gratitude. Victoria rose from her chair and moved around the table until she stood beside him. With a boldness she didn't know she possessed, she reached out to touch his face, her fingers tracing the strong line of his jaw. This isn't about obligation, she assured him. This is about a woman and a man who have promised to build a life together. I want that life to begin in earnest, Nathan. Tonight, Nathan stood slowly, his height making her tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. His hands came to rest lightly on her waist, and Victoria felt the warmth of them through the fabric of her dress. Victoria, he murmured, and then he was lowering his head, his lips meeting hers in their first true kiss. It was gentle at first, almost questioning, but when Victoria responded by sliding her arms around his neck, Nathan deepened the kiss. His arms encircled her, drawing her closer until she could feel the steady beat of his heart against her chest. Unlike the perfunctory kisses she had known in her previous marriage, this was an exploration, a conversation without words. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless, Nathan rested his forehead against hers. I've wanted to do that since our wedding day, he admitted. Victoria smiled up at him. Why did you wait so long? I wanted you to come to me willingly, not out of duty, he said, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. Worth the wait, though. Victoria laughed softly, feeling lighter than she had in years. The dishes can wait until morning, she suggested, her meaning clear. Nathan's eyes darkened with desire, but he maintained his composure. Are you certain, Victoria? Once we take this step, I'm certain, she interrupted, placing a finger against his lips. I want to be your wife in every way, Nathan, no more separate rooms. With a fluid movement that surprised her, Nathan swept her into his arms. Victoria gasped, instinctively wrapping her arms around his neck as he carried her toward the stairs. I've dreamed of doing this, he confessed, carrying her up to their bedroom. Bringing you to our bed as a proper husband should. In the bedroom, Nathan set her gently on her feet beside the bed. The last rays of sunset filtered through the curtains, bathing the room in golden light. There was a moment of shy awkwardness as they stood facing each other, the reality of what they were about to do suddenly very present. We can go slowly, Nathan assured her, reaching out to take her hands in his. We have all night, Victoria nodded, grateful for his understanding. She turned, presenting her back to him. Would you help with the buttons? Nathan's fingers were surprisingly deft as they worked the small buttons down her spine. Victoria closed her eyes, concentrating on the sensation of his touch, the whisper of fabric as her dress loosened. When the last button was undone, Nathan placed a gentle kiss on the nape of her neck, sending a shiver through her body. You're beautiful, he murmured against her skin. What followed was a revelation for Victoria. Where Edward had been hurried and mechanical, Nathan was patient and attentive, discovering what pleased her with gentle touches and whispered questions. He treated her body as something precious, worthy of exploration and care. Later, as they lay tangled in the sheets, Victoria's head resting on Nathan's chest, she marveled at how different intimacy could be when built on mutual respect and desire. Nathan's fingers trailed lazily up and down her bare arm, and she could hear the steady thump of his heart beneath her ear. Are you all right? He asked softly, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. Victoria smiled against his skin. More than all right, she assured him. I never knew it could be like this. Nathan's arm tightened around her. It should always be like this between us, Victoria. Equal partners in everything including pleasure. She tilted her head to look up at him, studying the strong lines of his face now relaxed in contentment. Thank you for being patient with me. Thank you for trusting me, he replied, his blue eyes warm with affection. For giving this marriage a real chance. Victoria laid her head back on his chest, listening to the night sounds of the ranch mingling with Nathan's steady breathing. For the first time since her divorce, perhaps even before that, she felt truly at peace. The weeks that followed were the happiest Victoria had known in years. She and Nathan fell into a comfortable rhythm, working side by side during the day and sharing their bed at night. The physical aspect of their marriage blossomed along with deeper feelings that neither had expected so soon. Summer arrived in full force, bringing scorching days and the constant threat of drought. Nathan worked from dawn until dusk, moving cattle to better pastures and ensuring the creek that supplied their water remained accessible. Victoria took charge of the household, expanding the garden despite the heat and learning to manage the ranch accounts with a skill that impressed her husband. One particularly hot afternoon in late July, Victoria was preparing a cold lunch when a wave of dizziness washed over her. She gripped the edge of the table, waiting for it to pass. It wasn't the first time she'd felt lightheaded in recent days, but she attributed it to the heat and the busy schedule she kept. "Victoria," Nathan's voice called from the doorway. He'd come in early for lunch, his shirt dampened with sweat from working in the fields. "Are you all right?" She straightened, offering him a reassuring smile. "Just a little dizzy. It's terribly hot today." Nathan crossed the room quickly, his brow furrowed with concern. "Sit down," he urged, guiding her to a chair. "Let me get you some water," Victoria obeyed, grateful for his attentiveness. As she sipped the cool water he brought her, she noticed Nathan studying her face intently. "What is it?" she asked. "How long have you been feeling dizzy?" He questioned, kneeling beside her chair. Victoria shrugged. "A few days, I suppose. It's nothing to worry about, just the heat." "And the nausea in the mornings," Nathan pressed. "I've noticed you haven't been eating much at breakfast." Victoria stared at him, surprised he had been so observant. "I didn't want to trouble you with it. It passes quickly enough." A curious expression crossed Nathan's face, something between hope and apprehension. "Victoria," he said carefully, "is it possible that you might be with child?" The question hung in the air between them. Victoria's hand trembled slightly, causing water to spill over the rim of her glass. "That's not possible," she whispered. "I can't. Edward always said I was barren." "Edward was a fool," Nathan said firmly, "and I'm beginning to think he was wrong about many things, including this." Victoria's mind raced, counting back the weeks since their wedding night, noting the subtle changes in her body that she had attributed to her new life on the ranch. Her monthly courses had not come, but she had assumed it was due to the change in circumstances, the physical work she now did daily. "Do you think it's possible?" she asked, her voice barely audible. Nathan took her hand in his expression gentle. "I think we should consider it. Maria's daughter-in-law is a midwife. I could ask her to come tomorrow if you'd like." Victoria nodded slowly, afraid to hope yet unable to suppress the flicker of possibility that had ignited within her. "Yes," she agreed. "I'd like that." Nathan smiled, bringing her hand to his lips. "Try not to worry either way," he said. "Whatever happens, we'll face it together." That night, Victoria lay awake long after Nathan had fallen asleep, his arm draped protectively across her waist. She placed her hand on her still flat stomach, trying to imagine the possibility of new life growing within her. After years of believing herself incapable, the thought was both terrifying and exhilarating. The next day, Maria's daughter-in-law, Louisa, arrived shortly after noon. She was a kind-faced woman with experienced hands and a gentle manner that immediately put Victoria at ease. "Señor Nathan, you must wait outside," Louisa instructed firmly. "This is women's business now." Nathan squeezed Victoria's hand before reluctantly leaving the bedroom. Victoria could picture him pacing the hallway, perhaps even the front porch, as Louisa asked questions about her symptoms and examined her with practiced efficiency. Finally, Louisa sat back with a satisfied smile. "Señora Thornton, I believe you are going to have a baby." "About 2 months along, I would guess." Victoria's heart seemed to stop and then race forward. "You're certain?" "As certain as anyone can be," Louisa confirmed. "The signs are all there. By next spring, you will be holding your little one." Tears filled Victoria's eyes, years of shame and disappointment washing away in a flood of joy. "Thank you," she whispered, clasping Louisa's hand gratefully. When Louisa opened the bedroom door, Nathan practically fell into the room, his expression a mixture of anxiety and hope. "Well?" he asked, looking from his wife to the midwife. "Congratulations, Señor Thornton," Louisa said with a broad smile. "You are going to be a father." Nathan froze, his gaze flying to Victoria's tear-streaked face. "It's true," he asked hoarsely. Victoria nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. Nathan crossed the room in 2 strides, gathering her carefully into his arms as though she had suddenly become fragile as glass. "A baby," he breathed against her hair. "Our baby." Victoria clung to him, feeling his body shake slightly with emotion. "I never thought, I always believed." "I know," Nathan soothed, pulling back to cup her face in his hands. "But you see, some things just need the right time and the right person to come together." After Louisa left, promising to return for regular checkups, Victoria and Nathan sat together on the porch swing, his arm around her shoulders as they watched the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. "Are you happy, Nathan?" Victoria asked, needing to hear the words. Nathan turned to face her, his expression more open and vulnerable than she had ever seen it. "Victoria, I married you believing we might never have children, and I was content with that future, but knowing we've created a new life together." He placed his hand gently on her stomach. "This is a blessing I never dared hope for." Victoria covered his hand with hers. "I was so certain I couldn't conceive, all those years with Edward." "Perhaps it wasn't you at all," Nathan suggested gently. "Have you considered that?" The thought had occurred to Victoria, especially now, but she had never spoken it aloud. "It doesn't matter now," she said. "What matters is this baby, our baby." As summer gave way to fall, Victoria's body changed with the seasons. Her slender frame softened, her waist thickening as their child grew within her. Nathan watched these changes with undisguised wonder, his hands gentle as they traced the growing curve of her belly each night. Word spread quickly through the county. Maria, bursting with pride as though the baby were her own grandchild, could hardly contain the news. Soon, visitors began to appear at the ranch, women from neighboring farms bringing gifts and advice, men coming to congratulate Nathan with hearty handshakes and knowing smiles. Victoria received their good wishes graciously, though she couldn't help noticing how differently they treated her now. The same women who had whispered behind their hands about her barrenness now sought her company, offering friendship that had been withheld before. "It shouldn't matter," she confided to Nathan one evening as they sat by the fire. "Whether I could have children or not, I'm the same person." Nathan nodded thoughtfully, stroking her hair as she rested against him. "People fear what they don't understand. They thought something was wrong with you, and that frightened them as if barrenness might be catching, like a disease. And now they see you as fulfilled, following the path they understand." He kissed the top of her head. "But we know the truth, Victoria. This baby is a blessing, but you were complete before with or without a child." His words warmed her heart, reinforcing what she had come to know in the months since their marriage. Nathan truly saw her as a whole person, valuable for herself, and not just for her ability to bear children. In October, as the first cool breezes hinted at the coming winter, a letter arrived from Victoria's brother in Boston. She opened it with trembling fingers, not having heard from James in over a year. "He's coming to visit," she told Nathan, scanning the elegant handwriting. "He says he wants to meet my new husband and reconcile our differences." Nathan, who had been repairing a chair at the kitchen table, looked up. "Do you want to see him?" Victoria considered the question. "Yes," she decided. "I think I do. We were close once before Edward came between us. And I'd like him to know his niece or nephew." James Harper arrived 2 weeks later, stepping down from the stagecoach in Cottonwood Springs with the polished appearance of an Eastern gentleman. Victoria and Nathan were there to meet him, and Victoria felt a flutter of nervousness as her brother approached. "Vicky," James said, using the childhood nickname she hadn't heard in years. His eyes widened as he took in her evident pregnancy. "You look radiant." Victoria smiled, accepting his awkward embrace. "It's good to see you, James. This is my husband, Nathan Thornton." The two men sized each other up before shaking hands. James was shorter than Nathan but carried himself with the confidence of education and wealth. Nathan, though dressed in his Sunday best, was unmistakably a working rancher, his hands bearing the calluses of honest labor. "Mr. Harper," Nathan said respectfully. "Welcome to Texas." "Mr. Thornton," James returned with equal formality. "I appreciate your hospitality." The ride back to the ranch was filled with cautious conversation as James asked polite questions about their property and Nathan's business. Victoria watched the interaction anxiously, hoping these two important men in her life might find common ground. It wasn't until after dinner, when Nathan excused himself to check on a mare about to foal, that Victoria found herself alone with her brother. They sat in the parlor, the awkwardness between them a tangible thing. "You seem happy," James said finally, breaking the silence. "Happier than I've seen you in years," Victoria nodded. "I am happy, James, very much so. And Thornton, he treats you well, better than I ever imagined being treated," she answered honestly. "He respects me, values my opinions, we're true partners." James studied his hands for a moment. "I owe you an apology, Victoria. I should have supported you during your difficulties with Edward. Instead, I judged you harshly." Victoria felt tears prick her eyes. "Why did you come now, after all this time?" "Father wrote to me," James admitted. "He told me about your divorce, your remarriage, and now the baby. He said you'd found happiness despite everything, and I wanted to see for myself." He looked up, his expression contrite. "And I wanted to make amends before my niece or nephew arrives. Family should stand together, not apart." Victoria reached across the space between them to take her brother's hand. "I've missed you, James." "I've missed you too, Vicky." He squeezed her hand. "Will you forgive me for being such a stubborn fool?" "Only if you'll forgive me for not fighting harder to keep you in my life," she replied, smiling through her tears. James stayed for a week, gradually warming to Nathan as he observed the obvious devotion between the rancher and his sister. By the time he departed, promising to return when the baby arrived, the brothers-in-law had developed a genuine respect for one another. "Your brother's not half bad," Nathan commented as they watched the stagecoach pull away. "For a city lawyer," Victoria laughed, leaning into his side. "He said much the same about you for a cowboy." As winter settled over the ranch, Victoria's pregnancy progressed smoothly. The baby grew active, especially at night, kicking and turning within her until Nathan would place his large hand on her belly and speak softly, somehow calming the child with the deep rumble of his voice. "He knows his father," Victoria teased one night as the baby settled under Nathan's touch. Nathan raised an eyebrow. "You sound certain," Victoria shrugged, smiling. "Just a feeling. Though I'd be equally happy with a daughter." "As would I," Nathan assured her, his expression tender. "Boy or girl, this child will be loved beyond measure." Christmas came, bringing with it a rare dusting of snow that transformed the ranch into a winter wonderland. Nathan surprised Victoria with a cradle he had crafted himself, the wood sanded smooth and stained a rich golden hue. "It's beautiful," she breathed, running her fingers over the intricate carvings of stars and moons that decorated the headboard. "When did you find time to make this?" "I worked on it at night in the barn," Nathan confessed. "After you'd gone to sleep, I wanted it to be a surprise." Victoria's gift to him was more practical: a new saddle she had saved from the egg, and butter money she'd earned selling to neighbors. Nathan's face lit up like a boy's on Christmas morning when he unwrapped it. "This is too much," he protested, though his fingers caressed the tooled leather appreciatively. "Nothing is too much for the man who gave me a new life," Victoria replied, watching his pleasure with satisfaction. As January turned to February, Victoria's movements became more cumbersome. Louisa visited weekly now, nodding with approval at Victoria's healthy appearance and the baby's strong movements. "Not much longer," she predicted during one visit. "The little one is in the right position, ready to meet the world." Victoria both anticipated and dreaded the birth. Though Louisa assured her that everything appeared normal, she couldn't help remembering the whispered stories of women who had died in childbirth, leaving their husbands and children bereft. Nathan seemed to sense her fears. "You're strong, Victoria," he told her one night as they lay together, his hand resting protectively over their child. "Stronger than you know, and I'll be right outside the door praying for both of you every second." His confidence bolstered her own, and as February drew to a close, Victoria felt a strange sense of calm descend upon her. She was ready to meet this child who had already changed her life so profoundly. The labor began on a cold March morning, the contractions waking Victoria before dawn. She lay still for a moment, breathing through the discomfort before gently shaking Nathan awake. "It's time," she whispered, watching his eyes fly open in immediate alertness. What followed was a blur of activity as Nathan sent Chester to fetch Louisa and Maria while he helped Victoria prepare. By mid-morning, the women had arrived, bringing with them clean linens, herbs, and the calm competence of those who had attended many births. "Men, wait downstairs," Maria instructed, shooing Nathan toward the door despite his reluctance to leave Victoria's side. "I'll be fine," Victoria assured him, managing a smile despite the intensifying contractions. "Go, I'm in good hands." The hours that followed tested Victoria's endurance to its limits. The pain came in waves, building to peaks that took her breath away before receding momentarily. Louisa and Maria worked efficiently around her, offering encouragement and guidance as her body labored to bring forth new life. "You're doing beautifully," Louisa praised as the afternoon waned. "The baby is coming soon now." Victoria, exhausted beyond words, gathered her remaining strength for the final push. Downstairs, she could hear Nathan's boots pacing the floor, his anxiety almost palpable even through the distance. When the baby finally emerged into Louisa's waiting hands, the cry that filled the room was strong and indignant, a new voice announcing its arrival to the world. Victoria collapsed against the pillows, tears of relief and joy streaming down her face. "A boy," Louisa announced, quickly cleaning and wrapping the infant. "A beautiful, healthy boy." Maria hurried to the door, calling down to Nathan, "Senor, come meet your son." Nathan took the stairs 2 at a time, bursting into the room with his hair disheveled and his face pale with worry. When he saw Victoria propped against the pillows, tired but smiling with a small bundle in her arms, he stopped short, overcome with emotion. "Victoria," he breathed, approaching the bed slowly. "Are you all right?" "I'm wonderful," she assured him, her voice weak but joyful. "Come meet your son, Nathan." Nathan sat carefully on the edge of the bed, his expression one of awe as Victoria pulled back the blanket to reveal the baby's face. The child had a shock of dark hair like his father's, and when he opened his eyes briefly, Victoria caught a glimpse of what might someday be the same intense blue. "He's perfect," Nathan whispered, reaching out a tentative finger to stroke the baby's cheek. "Absolutely perfect." Victoria watched as her husband, this strong man who had faced the hardships of frontier life without flinching, was completely undone by the tiny hand that wrapped instinctively around his finger. "What shall we call him?" she asked softly. Nathan looked up, his eyes shining with unshed tears. "I was thinking maybe Abraham, after your father. We could call him Abe." Victoria's heart swelled with love for this man who continually found ways to honor her and her family. "Abraham Nathan Thornton," she said, testing the name. "It's perfect." As Louisa and Maria quietly left the room, giving the new family privacy, Nathan carefully stretched out beside Victoria on the bed, his arm encircling her shoulders as they both gazed down at their son. "I never thought I could be this happy," Nathan confessed, pressing a kiss to Victoria's temple. "You've given me everything I never knew I wanted, Victoria." Victoria leaned into his embrace, the weight of their child solid and real against her chest. "And you've given me everything I thought I could never have," she replied. "A home, a family, love." Young Abe grew strong and healthy, the joy of his parents' lives. By his first birthday, he was toddling around the ranch house on sturdy legs, his dark curls bouncing, and his blue eyes, which had indeed remained as vibrant as his father's, taking in the world with endless curiosity. Victoria found motherhood to be the most challenging and rewarding role she had ever undertaken. There were sleepless nights and moments of frustration, but these were overshadowed by the overwhelming love she felt for her son and the partnership she continued to build with Nathan. On a warm evening in June, nearly 2 years after their wedding day, Victoria and Nathan sat on the porch swing, watching Abe play with wooden blocks on a quilt spread on the grass. The ranch had prospered under their joint care, with the horse breeding program becoming particularly successful. The house had expanded to include a new kitchen and a proper nursery, and plans were underway for additional improvements. "I had a letter from Edward's sister today," Victoria mentioned, her head resting comfortably on Nathan's shoulder. Nathan's arm tightened slightly around her. What did she want? To tell me that Edward remarried last month, Victoria replied, to a widow from San Antonio with 3 children of her own. Nathan was quiet for a moment. How do you feel about that? Victoria considered the question honestly. I wish him well, she said finally. It seems he found what he was looking for, a ready-made family. And you? Nathan asked, his voice gentle. Did you find what you were looking for? Victoria turned to face him, taking in the face that had become dearer to her than any other. The past 2 years had added a few lines around his eyes and perhaps a touch of silver at his temples, but to her, he was more handsome than ever. I found more than I ever dared to dream of, she told him sincerely. I found a true partner, a loving father for my child, and a man who sees me as I truly am, not for what I can or cannot give him, but for who I am. Nathan leaned forward to kiss her softly. I see a strong, beautiful woman who brought life and light back to this ranch and to my heart. They were interrupted by Abe, who toddled over with a block clutched in his small hand, offering it to his father with a gap-toothed smile. Nathan lifted the boy onto his lap, and Victoria watched as her husband pointed out a hawk circling in the distance, explaining in simple terms that the bird was hunting for its dinner. In that moment, with the golden light of sunset bathing her family in its warm glow, Victoria felt a completeness she had once thought forever denied to her. The whispers that had followed her through Cottonwood Springs now seemed as distant as another life, one that had led her, through pain and disappointment, to this place of profound joy. She placed her hand on her stomach, where another small life had just begun to flutter a secret she would share with Nathan tonight when they were alone. Another child to love, another blessing neither of them had dared to expect when they made their practical arrangement 2 years ago. What are you thinking about? Nathan asked, noticing her quiet smile. Victoria reached out to take his hand, squeezing it gently. I'm thinking that sometimes the end of one dream is just the beginning of a better one, she said. And that sometimes, the things we're told are impossible turn out to be merely waiting for the right time and the right love to become real. Nathan's eyes held hers, filled with understanding and shared joy. I love you, Victoria Thornton, he said simply. And I love you, she replied, her heart full to overflowing. Today, tomorrow, and all the days that follow. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the Texas sky in brilliant hues of red and gold, Victoria Thornton, once called barren, once cast aside, watched her son fall asleep in his father's strong arms and felt the gentle movement of their second child beneath her heart. The path that had led her here had not been easy, but as she leaned against her husband's shoulder and gazed out at the land they had nurtured together, Victoria knew with absolute certainty that every step had been worth taking. The woman who had once been defined by what she lacked was now surrounded by abundance, love, family, purpose, and the quiet confidence that came from being truly valued. In Nathan's eyes and in her children's faces, Victoria had found not just a second chance, but a first real opportunity to be herself, completely and without reservation. And in that discovery lay the greatest joy of all.